Ingamana, ingarea, ingata wida pumanawa, ro rakatirama, tenakoto, tenatato katoa. My name is Harlene Hain, and I have the great privilege of being the Vice Chancellor here at the University of Otago. And on behalf of the University, I would like to warmly welcome everyone who is collected here this evening to the inaugural professorial lecture for Professor James Maclaurin. As I look out this evening, I see academic and professional staff from the University of Otago. I see students from the University of Otago. I see former members of the University Council. I see the former Vice Chancellor of another university. And I see, as always, members of the general public who often use these inaugural professorial lectures as part of their ongoing education. So welcome to you all. I'd also like to begin with a very special welcome for members of James' family who are here with us this evening. His wife, Kristen, is here, his son, George, his mum, Priscilla, his brother, Dave, and his sister-in-law, Sonia, and their daughter, Alice. I know that your presence here this evening is a very clear signal of the importance of this particular event, and I know that your moral support is going to be very important to James as he delivers his lecture. Now, as all of you who are gathered here today, who come to these lectures often will know, the rank of a professor is the pinnacle of academic success. It requires sustained excellence in teaching, in research, and in service. Now, as you will soon learn from James' lecture, he is a highly accomplished researcher and a very, very gifted teacher. What you may not learn from his lecture, however, is about the massive contribution that James has made to the university more broadly. He's the former head of the philosophy department and the associate dean for research in the Division of Humanities. He's also served from time to time as the acting PVC of Humanities. He was the convener of the divisional working party into 100-level courses in Humanities. He was a member of the Research Action Plan Working Group. He is a regular facilitator for the Academic Leadership and Development Program here at Otago. He regularly participates in and chairs departmental reviews. He was one of the major driving forces behind the incredibly successful Bachelor of Arts and Sciences degree, and the list goes on and on and on. But from my perspective, the most important part of this story is that Professor Maclaurin has a deep-seated understanding of the joy inherent in an academic career. I have rarely, if ever, seen him without a smile on his face. He takes a solution-based approach to every single problem he encounters. And for me, he has always been a role model for the way in which I want to live my academic life. So, Professor Maclaurin, on behalf of the University of Otago, I would like to warmly welcome you to give your inaugural professorial lecture, and I would like to personally congratulate you on your very well-earned promotion to professor. But before you speak, I will first call on Professor Michael LeBoeuf, the current head of the philosophy department, to tell us just a little bit more about James' academic journey. Norera, tenakoto, tenatato katoa.
Kia ora. It's a great pleasure to be here tonight to celebrate James's promotion. Let me tell you a little bit about James's life. He was born here in Dunedin, grew up here in Dunedin, attended Kaikorai Primary School, Balmacuen Intermediate. I thought he was wearing a red sweater this morning still, but he's changed it. Otago Boys High School. In 1979, James began study here at Otago. He studied science, law, and the arts, an interdisciplinary interest that you'll see comes up again. He stopped in 1983 to take a professional acting career. He's appeared in Shakespeare's As You Like It, Tom Stoppard's On the Razzle, Beth Helney's Crimes of the Heart, and a one-man show, Samuel Beckett's Crap's Last Tape, which he tells me was his most difficult role. In the early 90s, James returned to the university, Victoria University at Wellington, He completed honors and master's degrees there, and then went on to take a PhD in philosophy from the Australian National University in 1998. Shortly after finishing, James joined Otago Philosophy, and he's been a major presence at the university since that time. Professor Hain gave us a lot of information, stole it from me about James's magnificent contributions to service. So let me say a little bit about some of his other contributions. James is a fantastic teacher, as I'm sure many of you here know. He won a Tertiary Teaching Excellence Award in 2011. His 100-level courses remain among the university's most popular. He's extremely productive and accomplished scholar, publishing widely across philosophy. James's book, What is Biodiversity?, published in 2008, is an instant classic in that field. He's also published in philosophy of time, philosophy of economics, philosophy of religion, and metaphilosophy. We in the Humanities are very proud of James and grateful for his contributions to the division. But a special trait of James is his ability to reach out across the university. We'll hear tonight about applied philosophy and the way it reaches into a bunch of different fields. I'd like to note that James has collaborative projects across all of the university's academic divisions, which may be a record. He's worked with computer science, law, information science, tourism, public health, marketing, and ecology. To give you just one recent example of his work, James formed the Artificial Intelligence and Society Group in 2016 with Colin Gavigan from law and Ollie Knott from computer science. The group started with just informal meetings on Friday afternoons, but it blossomed quickly. It won major grants, it founded a new university centre, and attracted interest from the New Zealand government, from the Australian government, and James has given presentations internationally and all the time in the field. So, James's presentation tonight, I'm sure you'll hear much more about this. The title is Applied Philosophy. Wait, what?
He aha, te mea nui o te au. He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. Kia ora tātou katoa. Thank you very much for those very kind introductions. I'll do my best to live up to them. Fundamental attribution error is that interesting feature of human beings, whereby when things go well, we stand a little taller and we think about some work that we did or a good idea that we had. And when things don't go our way, we say, gee, that was bad luck. Man, this is chancy. Don't you think, chancy? It's a lovely illustration of the difference between a strategy's being rational and its being sensible. It's not really rational to interpret our successes and our failures in such different ways. But it's not a bad way to be. If our successes are about our hard work and our good ideas, we bounce out of bed in the morning and we put our shoulder to those tasks that don't have a great chance of success, but be really great if they came off. And if our failures are due to bad luck, it cheers us up when things don't go our way. But I think sometimes when things do go our way, we should think about luck. And tonight is a lot about the luck that I've had in my life on my journey to becoming an applied philosopher. And in my life, luck has almost always been made of people. This is a book with 2 chapters. Chapter 1, Kristen Gillespie. I married Kristen Gillespie in 1994. Kristen Gillespie is a wonderful and wise woman. It is very difficult being married to a philosopher. Philosophers think arguments are good things. Philosophers want to argue about everything, which is annoying, as Kristen often nearly tells me. to make matters worse, Kristen found a philosopher who's sort of entrepreneurial. I've always got some scheme or idea or plan that I'm trying to build or get going or resuscitate. As I've learned from the great people at Otago Innovation over the years, being entrepreneurial is a little bit about business, a little bit about money, but really, it's about what happens when everything turns to custard. When this thing you've been working on for a year or 2 years suddenly looks like it's not going to come off. And every big project is like that at some point. It's tremendously important in that sort of life to have somebody who understands the ups and the downs, who will help you pick yourself up and get back out into the world. And that somebody is Kristen. It also, if you want to be an entrepreneur, it really helps if you're ridiculously optimistic. Did I mention annoying? Because that's really annoying. Maybe most importantly, it matters to have somebody with whom you want to celebrate. There she is. And Kristen gave me the greatest gift that any philosopher has ever got. A George. Now, you may have heard of other gifts. You may have seen things on the television. So I need to thank another group before I get into this little story of my career. I've been a member of the Department of Philosophy for 19 years, and that is nothing. It's a drop in the bucket in a department that has been going for 149 years. The Department of Philosophy is an amazing place to work. It's had amazing successes over the years. I'm not going to rehearse all the things that the Department of Philosophy has done, but I love working there. And I need to thank all the philosophers at Otago in that 149 years, and especially my colleagues now, and especially my students, because they're the ones who really teach you your discipline, as we all really know. And very especially, he says, scanning the room, I know he's in here, Professor Alan Musgrave, there you are, without whose guidance and encouragement, I wouldn't be here. I really wouldn't be here now. There's one more group that I've got to say thank you to before I start. So you know that I've had some sort of minor administrative roles. Well, I've had rather a lot of minor administrative roles over the years. Most of these roles, they work because you ask people for help again and again, and people say yes. I've had the most astounding level of generosity displayed to me day in, day out from people at this university. It's just remarkable. Yes, academic staff, but especially non-academic staff who work and work and work to get things right so that people like me can give fancy lectures and wear funny hats. I'm so grateful to those people. It's a sad fact, but true, that academics, and I do this too, we notice university administration when it doesn't do what we thought it was going to do, or when we think it's broken or something. We don't notice it when it's people working away behind the scenes to help us do what we do. So thank you to all those people, and a special thank you to Alison Stewart, who introduced me to about half of those people, the wonderful Alison Stewart. So you'll be glad to know I'm not going to say much about administration, because I don't think people find this a very compelling subject. But I am going to say one thing. I've noticed over the years in thinking about university administration, there's two sort of vices that it's easy to fall into. And one is the view that administration is just forms. It's bureaucracy. It's just annoying. It gets in the way. If only we didn't have it, we could get so much done. When, of course, if we didn't have it, we couldn't get anything done. Nobody would get paid. There'd be nowhere to go. There'd be no lights on. Nothing would happen. So that's one vice. The other vice, and I feel this occasionally when I'm in extremely long meetings, stage direction, turn right, stare at the Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Research, who isn't here. He loves very long meetings. When you sit in very long meetings all day, occasionally it's really tempting to think that administration is sort of, it's the thing. You know, it's what we do. It's most of the place. It's somehow what motivates what we do. This is also a crazy view. And to remind myself that this is a crazy view, I've invented a game. It's called For Administrative Purposes. There are two players. Player one says something important. Player two says for administrative purposes. I will demonstrate to you now. Ready? I love you. For administrative purposes. I think I was an odd child. Actually, I'm pretty sure I was an odd child. I have strong memories of reading the Oxford English Dictionary, concise, every night before I went to bed. I read pages because I thought words, language, are the most important thing that we have. Yes, there are people building rocket ships. Yes, there are people curing diseases, and these are great things. And without them, the world would be a worse place. But if we didn't have language, or if language somehow broke, we've got nothing. My first academic hero was a man called Mr. Sutherland. I don't know his first name. He was my teacher in Standard 4. That's in the old money for young people. I was about 10. Mr. Sutherland was a wonderful teacher. He was bright and very encouraging to a very distinctive young boy who I later discovered, to my horror, refused to have lunch with the other children. I wasn't bullied. I don't think I was unhappy. I just wanted to be with the teachers. and they relented and let me have lunch in the staff room. Now, I know you should use the word tragedy for tragedies. Mr. Sutherland used to call me the actually boy. Actually. So I think my first real piece of academic luck was meeting Mr. Sutherland. My second piece was not being murdered and buried in a shallow grave by my classmates at the age of 10. Thank you, room 6. So my second piece of evidence that I was an odd child, odd, insufferable, tomato, is from when I was 15. Another great teacher. I had so many great teachers. Richard Corbliss, Brian Beasley, wonderful, wonderful teachers. But this guy was a student teacher. We didn't have him for very long. I can't remember his name. He taught history. He was young. It was the late 1970s. He looked like a footballer. He had long hair. He had a thick Glaswegian accent, kind of Glaswegian swagger, the whole deal. And history was his thing. He was fantastic. And imagine our disappointment one day to discover that he was sick. We'd been waiting for this class all week and he didn't come. And instead the class was taken by the phys ed teacher who made an executive decision that he would not teach history that day. Instead, his class would focus on the prevention of shenanigans. And halfway through the class, he spotted shenanigans. There, off in a corner, was a boy paying far too much attention to the inside of his desk. For young people in the room, this was back when desks had lids, and you could... Now, being a phys ed teacher, he had cat-like reflexes. 1 minute, he was at the front of the room, gently sidling toward me. The next minute, he was right beside me, whipping open the lid of the desk, grabbing the offending item, looking up to find a copy of the King James Bible. Everybody I knew went to church. We all went to church. It was just the normal thing. It was fine. It was what you did. That's where you met people. But I didn't think that I knew anybody who'd ever actually read the Bible. And these things, to me, at 15, seemed connected. So I decided I had to read the Bible. And I started with the Old Testament. I read it before bed, but it just put me to sleep. If you have issues with insomnia, I can recommend the Book of Numbers. So I had to read it during the day. I read it at school. and I got caught. This is the first time when I can remember a sort of fascination that's followed me through my life with why it is that people believe what they believe. And this, after all, is fundamental to critical thinking that I've spent a lot of years teaching. So I don't know if you were cool at school. Obviously, I was not. But I did learn a very valuable lesson that day about the power of cultural artifacts. There are very few things that can make a room full of 15-year-old boys go suddenly completely silent and pensive. But the sight of a phys ed teacher who thinks that he's unwittingly outed a nascent theologian is one of those things. So I survived high school, implausible, I know, but I survived high school. And I got to university in 1979, this great university in 1979. It's a very different place to the university we see today. Fewer people went to university, really fewer people had the opportunity to go to university. It was a less diverse place, which wasn't so good. I think it was a less intense place, which maybe was a little bit better. People didn't arrive at university with a sort of laser-like focus on what job they wanted to do in life and how their degree was going to get them that job. University, for me, was like a kid in a sweet shop. For me, it was freedom. I could do anything I wanted. I did natural sciences, I did life sciences, psychology, philosophy, law, education, computer science, anything. You know, I was the sort of kid that people look at their academic record and say, what are you trying to do? I don't know what I was trying to do. I was just free. Unfortunately, that freedom also extended to spending inordinate amounts of time in the student union, reading very gloomy Russian novels, putting a whole lot of focus into playing music very badly in a now happily forgotten flying nun band, and having an active social calendar, which, as all the teachers in the room know, is a sort of shorthand for not being very successful. In a way, I was a little bit lost, I think. Having a good time, bit lost, until the University of Otago worked its magic on me and taught me the best thing, the most important thing that we ever teach anybody at university. What's he going to say? Is it calculus? No, it's Greek. It taught me how to learn. We talk a lot about learning how to learn, and I don't know that we really think carefully enough about what that is. It's not business as usual. You know, write that essay. No, not that way, that way. There, excellent. You've learned how to learn. Let's have a cup of tea. You know, that's not what you're doing. Learning how to learn is hard, and not everybody gets it. So if you teach first year, you know that some young people have learned how to learn before they get to university. You can see it. They hit the ground running as soon as they get to university. So I'm looking at the teachers in the room. That's not everybody, is it? Quite a lot of people get to university and they hit the ground sauntering. Why is that? Learning how to learn. Learning is risky. Really learning is risky. Yes, it's hard. Learning's hard. But it's risky. You've just finished school. Suddenly you're out in the world. Everybody's been telling you everything you've got to do for your whole life. And now it's you. Down to you. What are you going to study? Which papers will you take? Where are you going to live? What do you want for breakfast? What are you going to write the essay? Which essay will you write? How much time are you going to spend? There's a party. Do you want to go to the party? It's all down to you. And if you really got to university and decided, right, it's chemistry for me, and you threw yourself into chemistry and told everybody, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm going to do, you put all, what if it didn't work? Wouldn't that be terrible? And I think that risk makes quite a lot of young people cautious. They take a balanced approach. There are a few parties. There is a little bit of essay writing. There's some reading. There's a little bit of going to lectures. That's not really learning. So how do we get over the hump? How do we get past this? Luckily, there's a mechanism. We run into a subject that we love. Something that makes us jump out of bed in the morning, that suddenly we just discover is us. It's exciting. We want to talk about it. We want to go to the lectures. There's no question about whether we'll spend time writing the essay. We tell people this is what we do. We're one of these people. They're my peeps. I do this stuff. And when you do that, suddenly learning takes off. You take off. Learning repays you. Now, I'm thinking that lots of you are thinking, he's going to say, the subject in which I learned how to learn was philosophy. It wasn't. It was theatre, taught by the inimitable Lisa Warrington. He says, staring at the inimitable Lisa Warrington in the purple top, just in case you can't see her from where you're sitting. Lisa gave me something that I loved. Now, people are very different. A lot of people think that standing up on stage is, up there with, having a dental appointment. But for somebody like me, standing up on stage is exciting and powerful and risky and fundamentally communicative and about humanity. And that was my thing. Suddenly I found my thing, and I threw myself into it, and I loved it, and it loved me back. I'm not saying I was brilliant at it, but I learned. Boy, did I learn. And I got to thinking that I could learn things. That's how you learn how to learn. I don't think I knew it then, but I think that taught me now. I think there were two big lessons in this. One is, I want to be a teacher like you, Lisa Warrington. I want young people to come and do philosophy classes and think, this is my thing. That's interesting. I'm going to talk to somebody about that after class. I want to write the essay. I'm going to come. When's it on next? I'm going to come. Next time it's on. I want students to want to be in the room to find this thing that's exciting for them. It's not going to be every student, but my job is to get as many students and give them that thing. Second thing that it taught me, why are universities universities? Why are they universal? Why do we have to teach all these subjects? That's a lot of subjects. Why do we teach them all in one place? Because people are different, really different. And people will find different things that they love that will teach this most important lesson to them. And in Humanities, he says, looking at his PVC, well, he's writing a short novel. Sorry, I embarrassed somebody at lunchtime. I decided I'd try it again this evening. We have 4,700, 800, it's going up by the minute, effective full-time students who come to study humanities at the University of Otago. So they've chosen that thing. That's our opportunity to teach them how to learn. And that's been a big part of my life, we must have humanities. It's got to be taught with depth and with passion at Otago. So I became an actor, and it was all those things. It was fun and exciting, and there was a whole lot of waiting around, and there was thrills and spills, and all sorts of things happened. Rain on the roof. If you don't know what that is, ask an actor. They'll tell you. Won't they, Hillary? This story isn't that story. This is my academic story, so I'm sorry. I'm just going to jump over that whole thing. Now I'm 30. And I've been an actor for 8 or so years, and I'm resting, because actors occasionally are resting. And while resting, I decided that I should go back to university, because I had left Otago University to become an apprentice at the Fortune Theatre 8, 9 years before, having half a BSc, 2/3 of a BA, half a law degree. You know, exactly what that course advisor told me I was going to end up with. That's what I ended up with. So I thought I'd better come back and do a degree, finish a degree. And I chose philosophy because I'd spent a lot of my life with other people's ideas, performing other people's ideas, and I wanted to know more about ideas, and I wanted to think about my ideas. So I thought, right, the world of ideas, it is for me, I'll go back and it'll be philosophy. And I'd learned how to learn. And it was great from day one. And I loved it and did an honours degree, master's degree on mathematical information theory as an interpretation of the idea of genetic information. So I'm a philosopher of science. Then I went to ANU and did a PhD on biodiversity. I worked in that time, actually both at Vic and at ANU, because he moved institutions, with a philosopher called Kim Sterelny. Kim is a huge name and a huge figure in philosophy worldwide, particularly in naturalistic philosophy. What's naturalistic philosophy? What does that mean? Well, think about physics. You can do physics in a very sort of abstract mathematical way, or you can do it in a very practical sort of engineering way. Well, philosophy is exactly the same. You can do it in a very kind of abstract, logical way, metaphysics-y way, or you can do it in a more sort of philosophy of science-y way, ethics, political philosophy, that sort of thing. So I'm over here. There's obviously no sense in which one of these things is better than the other. You need both things, but I just happen to be over that side. Kim taught me a lot of things. He's a wonderful supervisor, is a wonderful supervisor. But I think the thing that I take away from my time with Kim, most of all, is the idea that everybody does philosophy in the same way, I hasten to add, as everybody does science. Right? Science, at base, is observation. Yes, it's systematized, it's engineered when you're doing experiments, it's mathematized, it's scholarly, it's all these things, but at the back of it all is observation. Philosophy, at base, is deduction, a sort of logical argument. Almost all of it is deduction. So, without going into the gory details, a deductive argument is one in which, if the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true, cannot possibly be false. Philosophers are people. This is a philosopher, therefore this is a person. It's not possible that the first two sentences can be true and the last one false. Everybody uses deduction all the time. What sort of pizza do we want? Where am I going to live? What am I going to do? But philosophers systematize, make scholarly, formalize, think about really difficult cases, think about difficult problems, just as the scientists do. But once you think that really philosophy is something that everybody does, then it strikes you that you could knock on anybody's door. You could knock on Kath's door and say, have you got any philosophical problems? Have you got any philosophical ideas that interest you? And it's amazing. I've worked with so many people in this university and others, and I don't think I've ever met anybody who couldn't pretty quickly articulate some philosophical idea or issue or concept that they were interested in, that they sort of would like to have a discussion about, maybe get some help on. So I drifted from being a philosopher of science into being a person who knocks on doors, into being an applied philosopher, somebody who works with people, often in other disciplines, but sometimes with people in government. I'll work with anybody who wants some philosophy, who's got a philosophical problem, wants an expert. It's not always me. I might not be an expert, but I can probably find you one. I love this work, and as Mike said, I've worked with people in every bit of the university. It's very exciting on all sorts of weird and wonderful things. And that led to a conversation on Union Street nearly 3 years ago, in which I ran into Ali Knott. He says, looking for Ali. I know he's out there. I saw him before. Yeah, hey. I ran into Ali. Ali's an expert in artificial intelligence in the Department of Computer Science. And Ali said, hey, are you interested in artificial intelligence? Because it seems to me that there's a huge amount of work being done in artificial intelligence. It's developing very quickly. It's getting very powerful in particular domains. But I'm not sure that many people are really working on what effects it's going to have, on what it might do with the way that we live and work. Are you interested in that? And I just thought, yes, thank you, Ali. This was brilliant. So we had a cup of coffee and we sat down and we roughed a few things out and we thought about things we might discuss. And it seemed to us that actually this might have important effects on actually the way we organize things, on the way society works, perhaps on laws and regulation and institutions. And then we realized that we didn't have enough lawyers, because you never have enough lawyers, Nicola. But in particular, the lawyer we needed is somewhere out there. I saw him before. Colin. Hey. We rang Colin, who's an expert in emergent technologies law. And from that grew the Artificial Intelligence and Society group that met many weeks of the year and discussed all sorts of wide-ranging things. And out of that grew the Artificial Intelligence and Law in New Zealand project, funded by the New Zealand Law Foundation, our work with the Artificial Intelligence and Australia project, funded by the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet in Australia to work out how much money they want to spend. It's just eye-watering what they've got to spend. That led to the development of the Centre for Artificial Intelligence and Public Policy, which Colin and I co-direct, which is we're so close, nearly signed an MOU with government. Oh, I'm getting the thumbs up from Kirby. We're in. Signed an MOU with government to work with government. We have a partner centre, the Eurohira Centre for Practical Ethics at Oxford, that we visit annually. It's been an amazing ride. It's a very exciting area to work in. And I want to just give you a few examples of some of the issues that we're interested in that I think, well, I hope will help us to think about what AI is going to do for us, and might say something about this relationship between science and the humanities, which has been a big part of my life. Autonomous vehicles promise so much. They could be safer than vehicles driven by people. They could be more efficient. They could be much better for the purposes of traffic management. They could do all sorts of things. They could be comfortable. You could sit and play chess. You wouldn't have to look at the road, all this sort of thing. But of course, we're not there yet. We've got semi-autonomous vehicles. And they're all very exciting, actually a little scary to ride in, but they're out there. Our group has driven through the centre of Dunedin. I'm not sure if I should say this, no hands, no feet. It was woo-hoo. But at the moment, we don't have technology that lets the car drive on itself, on its own, without supervision. So at the moment, we are required to have a monitor. So you and I are drivers when we drive. When you're sitting in an autonomous vehicle and it's doing the driving, you're a monitor. And you've got to sit there and watch the road, and if you don't do something, if you don't touch the wheel or give the car some indication that you're monitoring, it'll beep or flash a light or do something, depending on the make of car, every few minutes. It's kind of scary stuff. So who's in charge of that autonomous vehicle? How's that working? In a moral sense, in a legal sense, in a practical sense? What's the entity that's making the decisions? Interesting thing about an autonomous vehicle, or the Mercedes that we drove in, it's not like cruise control. You know, you tap the brake and cruise control turns off. Autonomous vehicle, it wants to go that way and you want to go that way. It's like driving by committee. Committees don't get things wrong. What are you laughing for? Neville Stanton is a psychologist who recently visited the Department of Psychology here and gave a fantastic lecture. So Neville works on this problem in the UK with, I think, Land Rover Jaguar. So here's what Neville said about monitoring an autonomous vehicle. A driver has a reaction time for a major event on the road, on average, about 0.6 of a second. We're pretty quick at noticing something and doing something about it. But our brains allot attention based on what we are doing, not on what we're monitoring. So they allot attention based on activity. So if you're sitting there not doing anything, your reaction time to a major event, on average, is more than 3 seconds. That's a big gap in which stuff can happen. As Neville says, the thing that driving an autonomous vehicle, we're being sold these are, cool, you buy an autonomous vehicle. The thing that monitoring an autonomous vehicle is most like is like teaching a teenager to drive. You're sitting there, things are happening, you can't do anything. So the technology isn't quite ready for prime time, but these other questions, these sort of moral questions, legal questions, who's in control? What are we doing here? There's a danger that what we're creating is what's known colourfully in the business as a moral crumple zone. A moral crumple zone is somebody who's put in charge of something, responsible for something that they can't really control. So it's very stark in the case of autonomous vehicles, but actually this pops up wherever we have people supervising AI. If I buy a system like Compass that's advising me whether or not to let somebody out on parole, and I'm sitting on the parole board and it's a black box and it says let them out, and we think no, what are we going to do? Open it up, look at the wiring. It costs a lot of money. I don't know, we must have bought it for some reason. I guess it knows more than we do. So this problem of control and supervision is a really important issue at the moment, where we're deploying artificial intelligence and we're nervous about the effects of artificial intelligence because it's doing something very important. It's letting people out of prison, or letting you into the country at the smart gate, or working out whether you'll get a hip operation. What do we do if we're not sure about whether it's good enough? We put a human in the loop. That's the phrase. Well, what do we get when we put a human in the loop? Sometimes I think good results, but unpredictable. Very multidisciplinary problem, really important. If we want to get benefit out of these systems, we want to use them, artificial intelligence, really powerful, can do wonderful things for us. Got to be able to use it in the right sort of way. So that's one issue. Let me tell you about another technology. PredPol, short for Predictive Policing, is a system that was designed by an anthropologist at UCLA, Jeffrey Brantingham. PredPol is a big data system that aggregates statistics about arrests and convictions and employs information about how criminals behave in working out if this house was robbed, how likely is it that somebody will rob the house next door? If somebody's robbing dairies, how likely is it that they'll keep robbing dairies as opposed to petrol stations, as opposed to something else? And what it does is it produces what are known as heat maps. So you get these maps with square boxes around them, and that says this is where to send the police cars tonight. It promises to be accurate. It's based on real information about where we're making arrests. It promises to be objective, to be efficient. It lets you use the same number of police cars, but to get greater effect out of them. So we've got all this data about where we're arresting people. Why are we arresting all the people over there? Where were we sending the police cars? Oh, over there. Why do we send it over there? Well, that's where we send them on Friday night. So that's where we make all the arrests, and the data tells us that that's where the crime is happening, and we don't know. This is an example of a predictive risk model. Predictive risk models aggregate history. History isn't always a good thing. There's lots of history we don't want to aggregate. So in thinking about, don't get me wrong. Amazon, Spotify, anybody? Predictive risk models, same thing. Aggregating history. He keeps reading books like this. I'll keep giving him books like that. Pretty good most of the time, sometimes crazy. Perfectly fine. Spotify, Amazon, I don't care. I don't care if it profiles me on Spotify. You know, it gives me music based on the fact that it thinks I'm a middle-aged white guy who lives in Dunedin. That would be fine. But what if we're using that to work out who gets bank loans? Or who gets arrested? So when we build these systems that are really just statistical systems, they're based on information that we have about the world, and they're allowing us to make predictions about the world. We have to think about what the consequences of those systems are, what successes and failures in the system look like, what it is that we want systems like this to do. Really powerful, really useful, potentially risky. LinkedIn had a system, I think they've stopped now, had a system where it automatically recommended the top 25 likely employees for any job that you'd put on the market. Historical data. All the people who used to do this job, middle-aged white guys. So who are they going to predict is going to be the best person to do it now? Whoa, hold on. We don't want that. One last case, and it's the case that everybody's heard of. Are we going to run out of jobs? How many jobs are we going to run out of? Is it 46% of jobs are going to disappear? No, it's 12%. Whoop, 31. Hold on. We've got all sorts of predictions. Why have we got so many predictions about how many jobs are going to disappear? Well, what are we trying to do here? How are we making these predictions? So, in part, we're making these predictions based on how we think science is going to progress. Science progresses in a stepwise fashion. I don't need to tell you this. You know, ordinary science, discovery, ordinary science, discovery, ordinary. The treads and the rises in this staircase are different lengths. 5 years out, we can make pretty good predictions. 20 years out, 30 years out, we have a long history of being complete rubbish at predicting the progress of science. So we've got this fundamental epistemic problem. How do we learn about this? Jobs aren't static. You know, so we're saying how many jobs are going to disappear? Have blacksmiths disappeared? Well, there aren't half as many of them as there used to be. Hardly any blacksmiths, but there are still blacksmiths. What is it for a job to disappear? Jobs change all the time. The contours of jobs change all the time. And whether or not a job disappears or whether or not we employ artificial intelligence for some particular purpose depends on people, on us. So think about things that have been automated recently. Insurance selling. You know, could that be automated? I don't know. Insurance salespeople, they involve, you know, lots of social interaction. Surely we can't actually, you know, imitate that in a machine. Turns out insurance sales shot online. People don't really like being with insurance salespeople. They don't like that process. So we'll make do with less of the personal interaction because we want that to be automated. Now, think about going to the supermarket. This isn't really AI, but it is automation. Think about going to the supermarket, checkout robots. Some supermarkets have lots of them. Some supermarkets have hardly any of them. The ones that have lots of them are cheap. Pack and save. The ones that don't have many, or none, are expensive. What does that tell you? People actually don't like them. You know, they would pay not to have a robot. They would pay to have a person who says hi and will pack the groceries and not wonder what your weight is or not be able to tell how old you are or all those things that the checkout robots can't do. So, you know, what gets automated and how things get automated rests a lot on people. So this is actually a really, really hard problem, the how many jobs are going to go problem. But also, in a way, it's just the wrong question to ask. Taylorization is that process whereby we chop jobs into bits. You know, time and motion. You know, the process that when we industrialize lots of things. So you have an artisan who makes a chair. She starts at the beginning, she gets the wood, she makes the chair, she sells the chair, she does everything. Kind of the market version. You know, the farmer's market version of making a chair. When you tailorize that job, somebody gets the wood. You cut the whole job up into lots and lots of little bits. Somebody does this bit, screws in that screw. Somebody puts that bit on. Somebody else does the selling. Somebody else does the administration. Artificial intelligence taylorizes jobs. It doesn't tailorize them in that way, but it chops jobs up. Because AI can do some things that people like you and I can do, but it can't do other things. And so we've got this really interesting, and again, very difficult to predict phenomenon where different bits of different jobs are getting changed. So the jobs themselves are changing. It's not about which jobs disappear. It's about how work changes. So I think the future, you know, for us is not about jobs disappearing. It's about change in work. And that's a really interesting problem for us as teachers, as universities. Again, these are really interdisciplinary problems: political, philosophical, ethical, sociological, economic, the whole deal. All right, let me draw two conclusions, then I'll stop. What does this tell us about universities? So what's the world of work going to be like in 20 years? We don't know. Will jobs disappear? Probably not. Not while jobs continue to be the fundamental organizing principle for distributive justice. You know, you get money proportionate to the sort of work you do. That's how societies organize. We could change it, but at the moment, there's a huge driver to make jobs remain. Will they be the same jobs? Will jobs be distributed in the same sort of way? Will this affect inequality? There's some evidence in the last few decades that high-paying jobs and low-paying jobs are getting more common, and the jobs in the middle are getting a wee bit less common. But that's the last couple of decades. We don't know what's going to happen in the next few decades. Will we at some point decide, you know, AI actually can do lots of these things that we do, and there is a group of people who don't work, who are actually very happy. We call them rich people. Could AI make us rich people? Would we like it to make us rich people? Would that be a better thing? I think what this tells us, as a university, as an institution, is that the days when we got to university and we had this laser-like focus on one job that was going to remain the same and we would have for the rest of our days, and we would do this degree that would get us that job, and then we were in and away we go. I think those days are likely over. Ooh, big prediction. Based on little data. Katrina. The graduates of the future, I think, need to be broad, need to be Renaissance people, need to have really wide skill sets, need to be the sort of people who can get out in the world and do lots of different jobs, need to have learned the greatest lesson that we teach, learning how to learn. That's our job, I think, from here on in. All right, one last conclusion I want to draw. Here's the slogan, right? Tomorrow, what did that guy say? I don't know. So if there's one thing that you take away from this lecture, here's the phrase. It's not a seesaw. Thank you very much. No. What does that mean? So we live in an era which is very technological, in which technology is very important in our lives. And the science behind it is very important in our lives and very valuable. Yes? I think so. Is it a seesaw? If the humanities, if science is fundamental and important, the humanities is not very important, not very valuable. So what I've tried to show by talking about all these examples is that actually this is crazy. To quote my old mate Jeremy Bentham, it's nonsense on stilts. If science is leaping forward and progressing, the humanities needs to leap forward and progress. Commerce needs to leap forward and progress at the same rate. If we want these technologies to give us the benefits that they can, really exciting benefits, and we want to ameliorate risks, and we want the world to be the way we want it, not just the way that Google wants it. We need to do this work. This is really important work for the humanities. It's my job. Thank you very much.
That's a pretty hard thing to follow up there, isn't it?
Get out there. Bit of song and dance.
Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Tony Valentine, and I'm the PVC Humanities here at the university. I was just saying to James that I have the hardest job in the university right now, which is to follow what he's just said. So it really is with great pleasure that I deliver this vote of thanks to Professor Maclaurin. He's delivered a truly exceptional lecture, I think, a set of reflections on his own academic pathway and some of the recurrent concerns that stand at the centre of his teaching and his research. His departure point this evening was the most fundamental part of all academic experiences in this university, learning how to learn, a phrase that recurred through James's talk. He reminded us that that process isn't natural necessarily, nor is it necessarily easy. And he has reminded us of just how important the example of a great teacher is. So we heard about his Standard 4 teacher, Mr. Sutherland, I think, and Lisa Warrington. It is all too easy, I think, to forget in the routines of our existence here in the university just how important the work we do in the classroom is. It's easy to take that for granted. What James has reminded us, I think, is about the power of great teachers to inspire and to help initiate really significant transformation. And that's a really very important message. He then took us with him on his research journey, a journey that developed through his return to university and then his PhD studies with Strelny at ANU, and then the subsequent development of his work here. I think through this narrative we got a sense of the working of an intensely curious mind. But also, I think quite intriguingly, the role of happenstance and coincidence in shaping research trajectories. So bumping into Ellie Knott on Union Street, having a coffee and thinking about common interests are great examples of the way in which a chance encounter perhaps can set somebody on a new trajectory and pose compelling new questions. Now, of course, that work that James has been doing on artificial intelligence is part of a wider constellation of problems and ideas that James has turned his attention to. And this evening we've thought with him through driverless cars, predictive policing, and the future of work. For James, each of these issues is an opportunity to think philosophically, to interrogate how ideas and arguments are formed and articulated, and an opportunity to develop clearer and more incisive modes of analysis. In James's hands, these questions are also an opportunity to demonstrate the ability of his beloved discipline of philosophy and humanistic inquiry more generally to engage with issues that are often seen as belonging to the domain of science. James pushes hard against any notion of these being part of two irreconcilable cultures of learning, the arts and the sciences. And that is something that is very clear from his lecture this evening and also from his way of being in this institution. James is a great connector. He is an intellectual bridge. He forges connections, linkages and pathways between parts of the university that are too often separate and self-contained. And I think that reach is just very obvious looking around the room, looking at this audience this evening. We have folks from right across the university, from philosophers to computer scientists, from lawyers to theologians, from economists to English scholars. But we also have a great number of students and a large number of folks from the city. So I think that's a testament to the range of James's thought. So Professor Maclaurin, we have greatly enjoyed your lecture. It has not just been a lecture, I think it has been a tour de force, full of compelling ideas and challenging questions, delivered with an irrepressible energy, verve, and great humour. I think it has embodied the richness and full range of possibilities that the lecture form still offers. So James, we've really enjoyed coming together to join in the celebration of your promotion, of your work, and the contribution you make to our institution. So could I invite you all to join me in thanking James? I have a gift to present to him, and after that I would encourage you all to join the academic party in the staff club for a reception.